No one saw the twins fall except the black waitress who saved them, unaware of their father. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Picture a bustling evening at a high-end restaurant in downtown Manhattan. The soft hum of conversation, the clinking of fine china, and the laughter of well-dressed patrons filled the air. The waiter, clad in a crisp black uniform, weaved through the maze of tables, balancing trays of gourmet dishes. Amid the evening's elegance, a quiet disturbance went unnoticed by the crowd until it was too late. As the twins, no older than 5, dashed through the restaurant's ornate foyer, their playful footsteps echoed, unaware that their excitement would soon take a dangerous turn. The girl, her blonde pigtails bouncing with every step, tripped over the edge of a rug. In an instant, she tumbled forward, pulling her brother down with her. The sound of their small bodies hitting the ground was drowned by the ambient noise around them. They were invisible in the sea of luxury until she saw them. Ava, a black waitress in her mid-20s, noticed the fall from the corner of her eye. Without a second thought, she rushed forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The other patrons continued their conversations, oblivious to the small catastrophe unfolding at the other end of the room. Kneeling beside the twins, Ava's hands gently reached for them, checking for any signs of injury. The boy's small cries broke the silence of her focused concentration. His sister, still dazed, was trying to sit up, but the fear in her eyes made it clear that the shock of the fall was enough to leave her unsettled. She quickly comforted them, her voice a soft whisper in the chaos of the restaurant, making sure they were unharmed. As she helped the children to their feet, their wide eyes locked onto hers with a look of gratitude, yet confusion. They had no idea who she was, nor did she know that these children were more connected to the restaurant than she could have ever imagined. Just as Ava was about to lead the twins back to their parents, the man emerged from the crowd. His tailored suit gleamed under the restaurant's chandelier. He was tall, with a stern yet worried expression as he hurried toward them. He looked down at Ava, his gaze shifting between her and the twins, who were now holding on to her with a trust that was unspoken but clear. "Are they all right?" he asked, his voice low and authoritative. Ava, feeling a wave of unease at the sudden attention, nodded. "Yes, they're fine." A little shaken, but nothing serious, she replied, her eyes still on the children. The man's expression softened just a fraction before his gaze turned to the twins. "Thank you," he said, his tone warmer now. But Ava, still trying to process what had just happened, couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from ordinary. What she didn't know, and what no one else in the room realized, was that this man, standing so calmly before her, was the billionaire owner of the very restaurant she worked for. His wealth and status were far beyond her understanding. In that moment, she had no idea that she had just saved the children of someone who would soon change her life forever. I was still kneeling on the ground, holding the twins as their trembling hands clutched mine, when the man, the one who appeared to be their father, stepped forward. His sharp suit and calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the chaos of the moment. He towered over me, his face masked with concern as his eyes scanned his children, checking for injuries. I stood up, the twins still holding on to me as if they had no intention of letting go. The boy was sniffing, but the tears had already stopped, and the girl, despite the slight bruise on her knee, was more startled than hurt. The father looked at me and nodded his thanks, his voice low, but there was something about his gaze that felt strange, distant. "Thank you for saving them," he said, his voice rich with authority. "They're fine," I replied quickly, forcing a smile. "Just a little shaken up, but nothing serious." I watched him carefully, wondering if he was one of those people who could brush off a moment like this without a second thought. But he didn't. His eyes lingered on the twins, and then they came back to me. "I'm glad you were there. I don't know what I would have done if something had happened to them." The way he said it, there was no doubt in my mind that he was a man who had everything and anything he could ever want, except for, perhaps, the connection to his children. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the twins, who seemed to be desperately searching for someone they could rely on. His words were polite, but they didn't reach me as warmly as I expected. I should get them back to our table, he added, and before I could say anything else, he was already guiding them away. I stood there for a moment, watching the man lead the twins back toward a luxurious table in the corner, away from the chaos. They looked small in comparison to the grandeur of their surroundings. But then again, they were children. They didn't belong in that world, or at least that's how it felt. But as I returned to my duties, my thoughts kept going back to that moment, when I had saved them. There was something unsettling about the father's detached calmness. As I wiped the table and cleared some dishes, I caught a glimpse of the man again. This time, he was sitting with his head down, deep in conversation with someone across from him, but his gaze seemed unfocused, distant. I wondered if it was the way his life had always been, busy, filled with luxury, yet devoid of real connection. I tried to push the thought aside and focus on my work. But for the rest of the evening, my thoughts kept wandering back to the twins. They hadn't said a word after the fall, but their wide eyes spoke volumes. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt there was something I wasn't seeing. I wasn't sure what to make of the whole situation. I had been a waitress at this upscale restaurant for almost a year, but it was nights like this that made me feel like I was invisible, like I didn't belong in this world. I wasn't rich. I didn't wear designer clothes. I had no one except for my friends from work. And even they weren't the closest. But there was something about the twins, the way they looked at me with such trust, that made me feel like I mattered. I didn't have much, but I could give them something that no one else in that room seemed willing to give: genuine care. As the evening went on, the restaurant quieted down and the lights dimmed. I found myself looking toward the corner where the man sat with his children. I wasn't sure why, but I felt an odd pull toward them. It wasn't just because I had saved them. There was something more to this story, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The night ended, and I clocked out, my mind still swirling with questions. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a weight settle in my chest. I wasn't sure what it was, but something told me this wasn't the last time I would cross paths with the twins or their father. I hadn't expected to see them again so soon. But there they were, sitting in a quiet corner of the restaurant just as I was finishing my shift. The twins were back, this time with their father. The man, whom I now recognized as a billionaire, appeared calm, almost detached, but his gaze kept shifting between the twins, watching them with a level of concern that contradicted his earlier aloofness. As I walked past their table to clear the plates, the girl, she had curly blonde hair, looked up and smiled at me. I stopped in my tracks. There was something so genuine in her smile that it caught me off guard. It was as if she remembered me, not as just the waitress who saved them, but as someone who cared. The boy, still quiet, was holding onto a small stuffed bear that looked out of place in the luxurious surroundings. I bent down to clear the table, and the man, noticing my pause, spoke. "Thank you again," he said. "I didn't catch your name last time." I straightened up, feeling a little awkward. "Ava," I replied, trying to keep my tone professional. "Ava," he repeated, as if testing the name. I didn't get the chance to properly introduce myself. "I'm Michael Pierce." His voice was smooth, almost like he had practiced being polite in moments like this. "I know this is a bit strange, but I'd like to thank you for what you did for my children the other night. You saved them. And he paused for a moment, looking at the twins before turning back to me. "I didn't realize how much I had been neglecting them until I saw how they reacted to you." I could feel my heart twist at his words. Was he really this unaware of his role in their lives? Or was he just too busy to notice? "They're lucky you were there," he continued. "But I don't want this to be the last time we meet. I'd like to offer you something, a gesture of thanks." I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't interested in his money, and I definitely wasn't looking for anything in return. But his offer hung in the air, and I could feel the weight of it, the pressure of being polite while also not knowing if I should accept. I didn't respond immediately, instead turning my attention to the twins. The boy, still clutching his bear, was watching me curiously. I smiled at him, and the smile he gave back was faint but sincere. "How are you feeling?" I asked him. His eyes were wide, like he hadn't expected me to speak directly to him. "Better," he said quietly, his voice soft. "I'm glad," I said, my voice a little softer than I had intended. I looked back at Michael, who was observing the moment with a keen interest. There was a discomfort in his eyes, as if he didn't know how to act in situations like these. "If you're free sometime, maybe we can talk more," Michael said. "I'd love to hear about your life, what you do." It was then that I realized something. I had no idea who he really was. I only knew him as the man who seemed to be caught in his own world, surrounded by wealth and power, but still somehow disconnected from the people around him. As I made my way back to the kitchen, I couldn't help but think about what had just happened. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that something about this whole encounter felt off. Maybe it was because Michael's world was so far removed from mine. Maybe it was because, despite his wealth and stature, he didn't seem to have the answers to the most basic questions about life and family. I couldn't get the image of the twins out of my head. Their small faces, the look of trust in their eyes, and the way they seemed to seek something more than just protection. They needed something real, something that neither money nor status could provide. When my shift ended, I walked outside into the cool evening air, the noise of the city surrounding me. I was tired, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There was something more to Michael and the twins, something I had yet to understand. The more I thought about them, the more I felt a pull, a sense that their lives were tangled with mine in ways I hadn't imagined. And I couldn't help but wonder, had I made a difference that night? Or had I just been a brief moment of comfort in their otherwise chaotic lives? I hadn't expected to see Michael again so soon, but there he was, waiting outside the restaurant as I finished my shift. He had his 2 children with him, and this time, they weren't just visiting. They seemed more at ease, more comfortable in his presence. But something in the way he stood, as if unsure of where he should be, made me question the kind of relationship they had. His eyes met mine as I walked out the door, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The twins were looking at me, the girl with her usual bright eyes, and the boy clutching his stuffed bear. Michael cleared his throat, as if he was about to say something, but paused. "I know this is a little unconventional," he began, his voice steady but with an edge of uncertainty. "But would you like to join us for dinner? As a thank you. I know it's been a while since the accident, and I feel I owe you more than just words." I hesitated, unsure. It wasn't like I had the time or the need to spend the evening with them, but something about the way he spoke, the sincerity in his voice, made me want to say yes. And then there were the twins. I couldn't ignore the way they had looked at me, the way they seemed to trust me despite everything. After a brief pause, I nodded. "All right," I said. "But just for a bit. I have to get back to my apartment later." Michael smiled, his expression more genuine than I had ever seen. "Of course. We'll make it quick." As we made our way to his car, the twins clambered into the back seat, their small voices chattering excitedly. I tried to ignore the strange sense of discomfort that was creeping up on me. This wasn't my world, I reminded myself. I was just a waitress, and he was, well, a billionaire. But still, something about this moment felt different. It felt like there was more to their story than I knew. We drove to a sleek, modern building in the heart of the city, and as we entered the restaurant, I felt out of place. The walls were adorned with expensive art, and the air smelled of fine cuisine. The waitstaff greeted Michael with a level of reverence that made me feel even more invisible. But Michael didn't act like a man who was accustomed to being revered. He didn't hold himself with the arrogance I'd expected from someone in his position. Instead, he seemed to be constantly on edge, as if searching for something, or someone, to connect with. After we sat down, the twins immediately began to tell me all about their favorite games and toys, while Michael sat back, watching them with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm sorry about all the time I've missed with them," he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "It's easy to get lost in the world of work, but I'm starting to realize I've missed out on what matters most." I looked at him, trying to understand what he was saying. "It's not too late," I said, trying to reassure him. "They're still young, and they need you. You can start now, even if it's small steps." Michael nodded slowly, his gaze turning toward the twins, who were now giggling over something trivial. His face softened, and for a brief moment, I saw the man behind the wealth. The father, the one who had been absent for so long. "I want to do better," he said, almost to himself. "I want to be there for them. I've just been so lost in everything else." The conversation shifted then, with Michael asking me about my life, about what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure how to respond. I was used to talking about the restaurant, about the other wait staff, but no one had ever asked me about my dreams before. I hesitated. "I don't really have a plan," I said, looking down at my hands. I just take it one day at a time. I've got bills to pay, you know. Michael's expression softened even more. You know, there's more to life than just getting by, he said. You don't have to settle for less than what you deserve. I looked up at him, unsure of what he meant. Was he offering me a chance at something more? Something better? The thought lingered in my mind as the evening wore on, but as the night drew to a close, I knew one thing for sure. This dinner, this chance encounter, had sparked something in me. Something I couldn't ignore. As we all got into the car to head back to the restaurant, Michael handed me his card. If you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to call me, he said. I took the card, but my fingers lingered on it longer than I should have. What did he mean by this? Was he offering help, or was he just trying to be kind? The twins were already asleep in the back seat, their small bodies curled up, lost in their dreams. Michael's eyes remained on the road ahead, but there was a shift in the air. Something was changing, not just for him, but for me too. We were two strangers who had crossed paths in a moment of chaos. And somehow, in this world full of uncertainties, we were beginning to find our way to each other. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my alarm blaring in the quiet of my small apartment. The sun had barely risen, but already the city outside was alive with activity. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the weight of the previous day settle on my shoulders. I had agreed to join Michael and the twins for dinner, but something about it had left me unsettled. It wasn't just the wealth and grandeur that surrounded them. It was the way Michael had looked at me, like he was searching for something I couldn't give him. Or maybe I couldn't give him what he truly needed, and that bothered me more than I cared to admit. As I got ready for another day at the restaurant, my thoughts kept returning to that dinner. The way Michael spoke about his children, the way he seemed so out of touch with their lives, made me wonder how much he truly understood what it meant to be a father. And yet, the twins had trusted me. In their eyes, I wasn't just the waitress. I was someone who had saved them, someone who had made them feel safe. That's what made it even harder for me to understand their father. I couldn't ignore the feeling that he was lost, trying to connect with his children but not knowing how. I arrived at the restaurant just as the doors opened, the usual bustle of the morning shift beginning to take form. The familiar faces of my co-workers greeted me, but my mind was still preoccupied with the events of the night before. It wasn't until later that evening, when Michael walked in, that I realized how much I had been thinking about him. He was alone this time, no children in tow, and he seemed different, almost like he was trying to figure something out. He spotted me across the room and walked over, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something I couldn't quite place. "Ava," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I wanted to talk to you." I didn't know what to say. "Sure," I replied, trying to sound casual, though I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. He glanced around, almost as if he was looking for someone or something. "You know," he began slowly, "I've been thinking about what you said, about being there for them." I nodded, unsure where this conversation was going. "I'm trying," he continued, his voice tinged with frustration. "But it's hard. I've spent so much of my life focused on building an empire, on creating something, that I lost sight of what really matters." His words were heavy, and I could see the weight of his confession in his eyes. "I want to make it right," he added, his gaze intense. "For them. For me." I looked at him for a long moment, trying to understand. "You can start small," I said softly. "It doesn't have to be all at once." He nodded, but the uncertainty still lingered. "It's just that I don't know where to start. I've been away for so long. I don't know how to be the father they need me to be." I was about to reply when the door opened and the twins walked in, looking around for their father. Michael turned to see them, and for a brief moment, his face softened. "They're everything to me," he said quietly, as if to himself. "And I feel like I've failed them." The twins ran up to him, their faces lighting up when they saw him. The girl reached up to hug him, and the boy clung to his leg, still holding his stuffed bear. Michael knelt down to their level, a smile forming on his face, and for the first time since I had met him, he looked genuinely happy. I watched the scene unfold, the contrast between his earlier words and the way he was with them now. It was like the man I had spoken to earlier was gone, replaced by someone who, for just a moment, knew exactly what he was doing. It made me realize something, that maybe he hadn't been lost all this time. Maybe he just needed a nudge to find his way back to what truly mattered. "Ava," Michael said, looking up at me, his expression more sincere than I had ever seen. I can't thank you enough for what you've done for them. You've shown me something that I couldn't see before. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. But before I could speak, the twins tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, the girl said, can we go get ice cream? Michael chuckled and stood up, looking down at his children. Of course, sweetheart, he said, ruffling her hair. Let's go. As they walked toward the door, the twins chattering excitedly about their ice cream choices, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale. But in that moment, it was enough. Michael was trying. And that was all that mattered. As I watched them leave, I realized that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. For all of us. I hadn't expected the call to come so soon. My phone rang late that night, just as I was about to turn in for the evening. I looked at the screen and saw Michael's name. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure of what this call might mean. I hadn't heard from him since that night at the restaurant, and though things had seemed to be going better with the twins, something in me felt like there was more I hadn't seen yet. I picked up the phone. Ava, Michael's voice came through the line, sounding a little strained. I need to talk to you. Can you meet me tomorrow? It's about the kids. His words were enough to make my heart race. The kids. Something had changed, and I could hear it in his voice. Of course, I replied. Where should I meet you? He gave me the address of a small cafe just a few blocks from my apartment. I'll be there at 10 in the morning, he said before hanging up. The next morning, I walked to the cafe with a sense of uncertainty hanging over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation would be different. I arrived early, finding a seat by the window and waiting for him. My mind kept returning to the twins, to their innocent smiles, and to the way they had seemed so hopeful when they looked at me. It was hard not to get attached, even though I knew this wasn't my world. I wasn't meant to be involved in their lives. But the more I thought about them, the more I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could make a difference. I didn't want to be a part of their world in the way that Michael was, but I wanted to be there for them in my own way. When Michael walked in, he looked different. The confident, polished man I had met before was gone. In his place was someone who looked tired, worn down by something more than just his busy life. His eyes met mine across the cafe, and I saw the weight of what he was carrying. He approached the table, sat down, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Ava, he started, his voice quiet but firm. I've been doing a lot of thinking since we last spoke. He paused, and I could see the struggle in his face. I've been so focused on my work, on everything I've built, that I've missed the most important part of my life. My kids. I felt a lump form in my throat. It wasn't just the words he was saying, but the way he said them. For the first time, I saw the man behind. The wealth, the father who had been absent for so long. I don't know how to fix it, he continued. But I know I have to start somewhere. And I think I need your help. My heart ached for him, for the twins. Michael, I said softly, you're already starting. You've realized what matters, and that's the first step. He nodded, but there was a doubt in his eyes. But what if it's too late? What if I can't make up for all the time I've missed? His words hung in the air, heavy with the uncertainty that had taken root in him. It's never too late, I said, trying to reassure him. The fact that you're here, that you care enough to ask for help, that's enough. The rest will come. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of hope, perhaps. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't met you, he said. You've made me see things differently. I don't know if I'll ever be the perfect father, but I want to try. That's all anyone can do, I replied. Try. And that's what matters most. There was a long pause as we both sat in the quiet of the cafe, the world outside moving on, oblivious to the small moment of change taking place inside. Finally, Michael spoke again. I want to make things right. For the twins. For me. And I want you to be a part of their lives, if that's okay with you. The words hit me harder than I expected. I had no idea what being a part of their lives would mean. I wasn't looking for anything more than to help in whatever small way I could. But hearing him say it, hearing him ask, it made something shift inside me. I don't know if I'm the right person for that, I said, my voice shaky. But I'll always be there for them. I care about them, Michael. And I care about you, too. But this isn't just about you. It's about them. They need you more than anyone else. Michael's eyes softened. I know, he said quietly. And I'm going to do everything I can to make up for what I've lost. Starting now. We sat there for a while longer, talking in hushed tones about the twins, about their lives, about the future. And when we finally stood up to leave, I felt a sense of peace settle in my chest. I wasn't sure where this path would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't walking it alone. Neither was Michael. And, most importantly, neither were the twins. I hadn't expected the turn of events that came next. After our conversation in the cafe, Michael's commitment to change seemed genuine, but I could tell that the road ahead would be difficult. The next week passed in a blur of small conversations, moments of connection, and occasional awkward silences. Michael was trying, but his life, his work, and his past all seemed to weigh heavily on him. It wasn't just about being present for the twins. It was about unraveling years of detachment, of burying emotions under layers of business deals and boardroom meetings. I had no idea how hard it would be for him to navigate that. But then something happened that shifted everything. I was working my usual evening shift when Michael called again. This time, his voice sounded more urgent, more panicked than I had ever heard it before. "Ava," he said, his words quick, "I need your help. It's about the kids." I could hear the tension in his voice, the quiet desperation that lurked underneath. "What's wrong?" I asked, my heart already racing. "It's not just about being their father. I found out something." He paused, his breath coming out in short bursts. "Something about their mother. I didn't know, Ava. I don't know if I can do this alone." I felt a pang in my chest. I knew there had to be more to this story, but I hadn't expected him to share it with me so soon. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm at the office." "Can you come?" he replied. I agreed without thinking twice. The office wasn't far from the restaurant, and though I wasn't sure what I was walking into, I knew I had to be there. When I arrived, the door to his office was slightly ajar, and I stepped inside quietly. Michael was sitting at his desk, a folder open in front of him, but he wasn't looking at the papers. His eyes were focused on something else, something I couldn't see. He looked up when I entered, his expression strained. "I don't know how to tell you this," he began, his voice low, "but I've just discovered something about their mother. Something I should have known before I brought them into my world." I sat down across from him, not knowing how to respond. He handed me the folder, his hand shaking slightly. The papers inside were filled with legal documents, letters, and photographs, and as I looked through them, a chilling realization began to settle in. Michael's children weren't just dealing with the absence of their father. They had been dealing with the trauma of a broken home, of a mother who had been unable to care for them properly. The documents revealed a history of neglect, of courts intervening, and of their mother's inability to provide a stable environment. It was clear that the twins had been through more than I could have imagined, more than anyone should ever go through. And Michael had been unaware of the depth of it all. "I had no idea," he whispered, his voice cracking as he looked at the papers. "I thought I was just giving them money, giving them things they needed. But I didn't give them what they really needed: love, stability, someone who would be there for them no matter what." I could see the guilt on his face, but I also saw something else: determination. He was finally seeing the truth, and he wasn't going to run from it. "It's not too late, Michael," I said softly. "You're here now. You've made the decision to be a part of their lives, and that's what matters." He nodded slowly, but I could tell that the weight of the past was still pressing down on him. "I need to do more than just be there for them," he said, his voice firm now. "I need to help them heal. I need to give them the childhood they deserve." I could see the transformation beginning, the shift from guilt to action. He wasn't just accepting responsibility anymore. He was ready to take on the challenge of being the father they needed, and that meant more than anything else. I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, I knew Michael was finally ready to face it. As I left his office that evening, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Michael wasn't just a man trying to make up for lost time. He was a man committed to change. And though the road ahead would be long, he wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't sure how it would all unfold, but for the first time, I believed that things could be different, for the twins, for Michael, and for me. I was in the middle of my shift when Michael called again. The sound of his voice on the other end was different this time. Tense, urgent, almost panicked. "Ava," he said, "I need your help." His words immediately set off alarms in my mind. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady, though I could feel my heart start to race. "It's about the kids," he said, and I could hear the strain in his voice. I thought I had everything under control, but something's happened. Something I didn't see coming. I didn't ask for specifics. I had already learned by now that Michael wasn't one to reach out unless it was serious. "Where do you need me to go?" I asked, already grabbing my things to leave the restaurant. He gave me an address, just a few blocks away from where I worked. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I told him before hanging up. I had no idea what was going on, but I knew one thing. Whatever it was, Michael needed me, and I wasn't going to let him down. When I arrived, I found Michael in his car, parked in front of a small, unmarked building. He looked tired, worn out, but there was an urgency in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Without saying a word, he opened the car door for me. We didn't speak much as we walked inside. I was trying to figure out what could possibly be so urgent, but Michael was lost in his thoughts, his eyes distant. He led me into a small, dimly lit office, where he sat down and gestured for me to do the same. "I don't know how to explain this," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I found something that I didn't know about the kids, and I'm not sure how to handle it." I was already bracing myself for whatever news he was about to deliver. "What did you find?" I asked gently, trying to keep my voice calm. Michael took a deep breath and opened a folder in front of him. The papers inside were filled with legal documents, a mix of old court orders, adoption papers, and medical records. He pushed them across the desk toward me. I scanned through the pages, feeling the weight of each document as my eyes landed on a few words: termination of parental rights, unfit mother, and placement in foster care. My stomach sank. "What is all this?" I asked, my voice shaky. "The twins, they weren't just neglected. They were abandoned," Michael said, his voice trembling now. "Their mother, she couldn't care for them, and I didn't know. I didn't know that all this time, they've been dealing with the aftermath of everything that happened before I even came into their lives." The reality of the situation hit me hard. I could see it now, the layers of trauma that the twins had been carrying with them, all while Michael was absent, too caught up in his own world to see what was really going on. He hadn't known the full extent of their past, of the struggles they'd been through before they even came to him. "I've been so focused on fixing things now," Michael continued, his voice breaking. "But I didn't realize how deep the damage went. I didn't realize how much work they still need. How much I need to do." "You're doing what you can now," I said, trying to reassure him, though my heart was heavy with what we were learning. "They need you to be present, Michael. Not just in the big moments, but every day. They need to know you're there, that you're not going anywhere." He looked at me, his eyes filled with something, regret, perhaps, or guilt. "I thought I could fix everything with money," he said. "But money doesn't heal wounds. It doesn't undo what's been done." I could hear the realization in his voice. It was clear now that he understood. He wasn't just trying to make up for lost time. He was trying to break the cycle, to be the father they needed, even if that meant facing the hard truths about the past. "It's not too late," I said, my voice steady despite the overwhelming emotions. "They still have time, Michael. They still have you. And you still have time to make things right." He nodded slowly, looking down at the papers in front of him. "I know," he said quietly, "but I don't know where to start." I reached across the table and put my hand on top of his. "You start by being there for them, Michael. Start by showing them that you're not going anywhere. Start by showing them that they're worth it. And then, take it one step at a time." Michael looked up at me, his eyes clearer than I had ever seen them. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you." I smiled, though it wasn't an easy smile. "You're not alone, Michael. You never have been." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling around us. I didn't know what the future held for Michael and the twins. I didn't know if things would get better or worse before they finally started to heal. But what I did know was that, for the first time, Michael was ready to face it all. And that gave me hope. Because no matter how broken things seemed, there was always a chance to rebuild, to start over, to create something better. For the twins. For Michael. For all of us. I had been waiting for the phone call for days, but when it came, I didn't know how to react. Michael's voice on the other end was low, filled with urgency and a touch of fear that I hadn't heard before. "Ava," he said, "I need you to meet me. It's about the kids. There's something you need to know." My heart raced. What could be so urgent? What did he mean by something I needed to know? I didn't hesitate for a second. "Where?" I asked. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. He gave me an address, a place I recognized only as an old building near the edge of the city, somewhere quiet and tucked away from the hustle and bustle of Manhattan. I made my way there quickly, my mind racing with questions, none of which had answers. The moment I arrived, I spotted Michael standing outside, pacing back and forth. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders tense, and when he saw me, he stopped dead in his tracks. "Ava," he said, his voice tight. "Thanks for coming." I didn't know who else to call. His words left me feeling unsettled. There was a heaviness in the air, an unspoken tension that made everything feel more urgent. "What's going on?" I asked, walking closer. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he motioned for me to follow him inside the building. The lobby was dimly lit, with old wooden floors that creaked underfoot. He led me up a staircase, and I noticed that the air felt colder here. Everything about this place felt wrong, like it didn't belong in the world of wealth and luxury Michael had been living in. At the top of the stairs, he opened a door to a small office. Inside, the walls were lined with filing cabinets and shelves of old books. A single light hung overhead, casting a low glow across the room. Michael shut the door behind us, and I noticed the stack of papers on the desk. "What is this?" I asked, gesturing toward the papers. "I found something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "It's about their mother. There's something I didn't know, something I should have known all along." My heart sank as I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He hesitated for a moment, then pulled the papers toward him. "These are court records. Adoption papers. Documents about the twins' biological mother. She wasn't fit to care for them, Ava. I didn't know. I thought I was stepping into a situation where I could be their father, but I didn't know the full story." I stared at the papers, trying to process what he was saying. "They've been through so much more than I ever imagined," he continued, his voice breaking. "Their mother wasn't just absent. She was incapable. And now, I'm realizing that I've been doing the same thing. I've been here, but I haven't really been here for them. Not like I should have been." I could feel the weight of his words settle in my chest. The man I had seen before, the man trying to fix his mistakes, was now facing the reality that his past actions were not just mistakes. They were deeply rooted issues that would take time to undo. "Michael," I said softly, trying to reassure him, "you're doing the best you can. You're here now. That's what matters." But he shook his head. "I thought money and gifts would fix everything. I thought if I gave them what they wanted, it would be enough. But it's not. They need me. They need my time. They need a father, not just someone who signs the checks." I could see the frustration in his eyes, the pain of realizing that being a parent wasn't about providing material things. It was about being present, about being there when they needed him most. "You're learning," I said quietly. "That's the first step. They need your love and your time. They need to feel that you're committed to them, to their future." He looked at me, his eyes filled with gratitude, but there was still uncertainty there. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, his voice soft. "I don't know if I can fix everything I've broken." I placed a hand on his arm, giving him a reassuring squeeze. "You don't have to fix everything at once," I said. "Just take it one day at a time. They're still kids, Michael. They'll need you for years to come. And you're here now. That's what matters." He nodded, but there was still a look of doubt in his eyes. It was clear that Michael had come to terms with the fact that he couldn't undo the past, but the future was still open to him. And that, I realized, was what he was really afraid of, facing a future where he wasn't sure how to be the father his children needed. "I don't want to mess this up," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I want to do it right." "You will," I assured him. "It'll take time, but you're already on the right path." As we sat in the small, quiet office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope stirring inside me. This wasn't the end of the road for Michael or for the twins. It was just the beginning. A new chapter was starting, and though the path ahead would be long and uncertain, they weren't alone. Not anymore. I had never expected a single decision to change everything. But here I was, standing at the crossroads of a new reality. Michael had come a long way in just a few weeks. The transformation was undeniable, yet the journey ahead was far from easy. He was learning, not just about his children, but about himself. We had spent so much time talking about his past mistakes, about the things he had missed, and what he needed to do to make things right. But now, the real test was beginning. It was one thing to say he wanted to be a better father. It was another to live it, day in and day out. The twins had been through so much, and they needed stability, consistency. And though I could see how hard Michael was trying, I could tell there was still something missing. One Saturday morning, Michael invited me to their home. He had planned a family day, one where the twins could simply enjoy being kids again. I wasn't sure what to expect. but I agreed to join them. When I arrived, I was met with the sound of laughter. The twins were running around the backyard, their faces flushed with excitement. Michael was standing by the grill, flipping burgers, his sleeves rolled up. He looked relaxed, happy even, something I had never seen in him before. As soon as the twins saw me, they ran over, their smiles wide. Ava, come play with us, the girl shouted, grabbing my hand. I smiled, a warmth spreading through me at the sight of their joy. I'll be there in just a minute, I said, watching as they ran off to continue their game. Michael watched me for a moment, then turned back to the grill. I didn't think they'd be this excited, he said, his voice filled with something close to pride. They need this. They need to feel normal again. I know it's not perfect, but at least I'm here. I nodded, smiling softly. You're doing great, Michael. This is exactly what they need. He seemed to relax a little more, his shoulders unwinding as he watched the kids. As we spent the day together, I couldn't help but notice the little moments. Michael playing catch with the twins, the way he made sure they were both eating enough, how he listened when they talked about their day. He wasn't just there physically anymore, he was truly present. But there was still something in his eyes, a hint of doubt, a fear that maybe it wouldn't be enough. Later, as the sun started to set, Michael and I sat on the porch, watching the kids run around in the distance. The twins were carefree, their laughter echoing across the yard. Michael's gaze shifted to them, and for a moment, he was quiet. I didn't realize how much I had missed until I started really looking at them, he said, his voice barely audible. I thought I was doing the right thing by giving them everything. But I see now that what they really needed was me. All this time, I've been running away from what truly matters. I've been so scared of failing them that I've kept my distance. I turned to face him, watching as he struggled to put his feelings into words. But you're here now, I said gently. And you're not going anywhere. Michael looked at me, his expression softening. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make up for all the lost time, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I'm going to try. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure they don't feel abandoned anymore. The sincerity in his words hit me hard. I had seen him go through the motions before, trying to prove that he could be a good father. But now, I saw a man who was ready to fight for his children, no matter what. The uncertainty in his eyes was still there, but it wasn't the same. He had come to terms with his past, and now he was looking toward the future. And for the first time, I truly believed that he could do it. As the evening wore on, the four of us sat down to eat, the table filled with food and laughter. It was the first time in a long while that I saw the twins so happy, so at ease. The tension that had hung over them for so long seemed to be lifting, even if just for a little while. After dinner, as we sat on the porch, Michael turned to me. I don't know what the future holds, he said, his voice steady. But I know I want to be part of it. For them. For me. For us. I smiled, watching as the twins ran around the yard, their laughter filling the air. You're already doing it, Michael, I said. You're already part of their future. The night ended with a sense of peace, one that had been hard to come by in the past few weeks. Michael had a long road ahead of him, but he wasn't walking it alone, and neither were the twins. They had each other, and they had him, and that was all that really mattered. I had thought that things were starting to settle down. Michael had been more present than ever, and the twins were adjusting to the new routine, their laughter filling the house once more. Yet, I had learned over the past few months that just when you think you have everything figured out, life has a way of throwing a curveball. That curveball came in the form of a phone call. It was late one evening when Michael's number appeared on my screen. I had just finished a long shift at the restaurant and was ready to unwind, but when I saw his name, I knew something was off. Ava, we need to talk, he said, his voice filled with a sense of urgency I hadn't heard before. It's about the kids. My stomach sank, and without thinking, I grabbed my jacket and rushed out the door. I'll be there in 10, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I didn't know what was happening, but the fear in Michael's voice told me it was something serious. When I arrived at his apartment, Michael was standing by the window, looking out at the city below. His back was to me, but I could tell something was weighing heavily on him. The twins weren't around, and the quiet of the apartment felt eerie. What's going on? I asked, stepping closer. He turned to face me, his expression dark and filled with worry. I found something, he began, his voice trembling. Something about their past. About their mother. I felt my heart race. What do you mean? I asked, afraid of what I might hear. Michael walked over to the desk, picking up a manila folder filled with papers. He handed it to me without a word. I opened the folder, my eyes scanning over the documents. There were court papers, medical records, and what looked like old photographs of the twins with their mother. As I read through them, a sickening realization settled in. The twins had been in and out of the foster system. Their biological mother had struggled with severe mental health issues, and there had been multiple attempts to regain custody. They had been caught in a broken system, and Michael had never known the full extent of their trauma. I thought I could give them a better life, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. But I didn't know what they had been through. I didn't know that they were still carrying all of that with them. I looked up from the papers, meeting his eyes. Michael, I said softly, you're doing the best you can. This is not your fault. He shook his head, his hand running through his hair. I should have known, he said, his voice breaking. I should have done more. I should have seen the signs. I stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You can't change the past, but you can change the future, I said. The twins need you more than ever now. You've already made a huge difference just by being here, by showing up for them. He looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a glimpse of hope in his eyes. I don't know how to fix this, Ava, he admitted. I don't know how to undo the hurt they've already been through. I gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. You don't have to fix everything all at once, I said. But you're showing them that they're not alone anymore. That's what they need the most. Michael took a deep breath, looking down at the folder in his hands. I want to do everything I can for them. I want to give them the childhood they never had. But I don't know where to start. I thought for a moment, then spoke. Start by being there, every day. Let them see you. Let them know that you're not going anywhere. And listen to them, Michael. They've been through a lot, and they need to know that they can talk to you about anything. He nodded slowly, taking in my words. Thank you, Ava, he said quietly, for being here, for helping me through this. I smiled at him, though it wasn't an easy smile. I knew that this was just the beginning. Michael had a long road ahead of him, and so did the twins. But for the first time, I believed that Michael was ready to face it. And more importantly, he wasn't facing it alone. The next day, Michael made arrangements for the twins to see a therapist, someone who could help them work through the trauma of their past. He started spending more time with them, doing the little things, helping them with their homework, taking them to the park, and just listening when they wanted to talk. The change in their behavior was subtle, but I could see it. They were slowly starting to open up, to trust that Michael was really there for them. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of hesitation, still moments of fear. But they were starting to heal, and Michael was becoming the father they needed him to be. It was a long and difficult road, but I had no doubt that they would get there, together. And for the first time, I saw Michael as the man he was meant to be, someone who was ready to give everything for his children, no matter what it took. I could feel the shift happening, both in Michael and in the twins. It wasn't instant, but the cracks in the walls they had built around themselves were slowly starting to heal. Michael had been doing everything right, showing up, making time, and, most importantly, being honest with himself about the kind of father he needed to be. But even with all the progress, the road ahead was still uncertain. The fear of slipping back into old patterns was always there, lingering in the background. That fear became all too real when a letter arrived at Michael's office one Monday morning. It was addressed to him, but the return address was unfamiliar. He opened it, his brow furrowing as he read through the contents. When he looked up, his face was pale, his eyes shadowed with disbelief. Ava, I don't know what to do, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It's from the adoption agency. They're saying the twins' biological mother is trying to regain custody. She's in a better place now, they say, and she wants them back. I could hear the panic in his voice, even as he tried to steady himself. What does that mean for them? I asked softly, though I already had a sinking feeling. It means they could be taken away, he replied, his voice strained. It means everything I've done to try and make things right could be undone in an instant. I stood there for a moment, processing what he had said. This wasn't just about Michael anymore. This was about the twins, about the life they had started to build with him. They had finally begun to trust him, to feel safe with him, and now that could all be taken away. We need to figure out what to do, I said, my voice firm, though I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Michael nodded, his jaw tightening. I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight this, he said, his eyes distant. I don't know if I can lose them again. I could see the fear in his eyes, the fear of losing what he had worked so hard to rebuild. But I also saw something else, determination. Michael wasn't going to let go without a fight. "You're stronger than you think," I said, stepping closer to him. "You've already proven that. And you're not alone. We'll figure this out together." We spent the next few days gathering information. Michael reached out to his lawyer, and I helped him organize his thoughts. The process was slow, frustrating, and at times, it felt like we were up against an unmovable wall. But we kept pushing forward. Every time Michael felt defeated, I reminded him of how far he had come. Every time the twins seemed worried or unsettled, I reminded them that we were in this together. One afternoon, a few days later, Michael called me into his office. He had just received another letter. This time, it was from the adoption agency, confirming a hearing for the custody case. The date was set. Michael looked at me, his face a mask of exhaustion. "I don't know what to do next," he said, rubbing his temples. "I don't know if I can keep this up." I sat down next to him, placing a hand on his. "You're not alone," I said. "You've already done so much for them. You've been there when no one else was. And now it's time for you to stand up for them, for what they deserve." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. "You're right," he said, his voice steadying. "I've spent too much of my life being afraid of losing them. But now I know, no matter what happens, I will fight for them. I will do whatever it takes." The day of the hearing arrived faster than we had anticipated. Michael was anxious, pacing around his apartment while the twins played quietly in the living room. I could see the nerves written all over his face, but I also saw the resolve in his eyes. This was it, the moment where everything he had worked for would be put to the test. I sat with him in the courtroom, trying to offer as much support as I could. The tension in the room was palpable, but Michael kept his focus on the twins, who were sitting next to him, holding his hand tightly. The hearing was long and drawn out, filled with arguments from both sides. The agency's representatives spoke about the twins' biological mother and how she had turned her life around. They painted a picture of a woman who had found stability, who was ready to provide a better life for her children. But Michael didn't back down. He spoke from his heart, talking about the bond he had formed with the twins, about the way they had begun to heal, and about the love he had for them. He didn't just speak about what he had done for them. He spoke about what they had done for him. The moment the judge made her ruling, it felt like time stood still. I held my breath, my heart racing. And then, the judge spoke. "In light of the evidence presented and the bond that has clearly been established between the children and their current guardian, I have decided that the children will remain in the custody of Mr. Pierce." Michael's face was a mixture of relief and exhaustion as he heard the verdict. It wasn't over, but it was a victory, a big one. As we left the courthouse that day, Michael looked at me, his expression softening. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said quietly. "You've helped me more than you'll ever know." I smiled, though the tears threatened to spill over. "You did this, Michael," I said. "You fought for them. You showed up when it mattered." The twins were overjoyed, their faces lighting up as we walked to the car. They had no idea how close they had come to losing everything, but they knew one thing. They had a father who loved them, and that was all that mattered. I could feel the weight of the decision still hanging over us. The judge's ruling had given us a victory, but the battle was far from over. Michael had fought hard to keep the twins, and he had won. But the reality of raising them, of providing for them in a way that their mother had failed to do, was not something that could be fixed with a court order. It would take time. It would take patience. And, most of all, it would take consistency. Michael knew that. I saw it in the way he moved through his days now, steadier, more intentional, but still full of quiet uncertainty. The next few weeks passed with small, incremental steps. The twins adjusted to their new life with Michael, and though there were still moments of fear, there were also moments of joy. Michael had changed his routine, making time for the things he had once ignored. Dinner with the kids every night, taking them to school every morning, helping them with homework, and playing games with them. These were small things, but they mattered. They were beginning to form the foundation of a real family. One evening, as we sat in the living room after the twins had gone to bed, Michael turned to me, his face more tired than usual. "Ava," he said softly, "I never realized how much I've missed. How much I've been running from. I've spent so much time building something that I thought would fill the emptiness inside me. But what I didn't realize was that the emptiness wasn't in my bank account. It was in my heart. And the only thing that can fill it is them. His words struck me deeply. This wasn't just about becoming a father. This was about Michael confronting the parts of himself he had avoided for so long. It wasn't just about the twins' past. It was about his own, about the things he had hidden from for years. "You're doing it, Michael," I said, my voice steady. "You're here. You're present. That's all that matters." He looked at me, his eyes tired but clear. "I don't know how I got so lost, but I'm starting to see the way out. I'm starting to see them, really see them. And I'm not going to stop. Not ever again." A sense of peace settled in my chest. I had seen Michael struggle, seen him fight against himself. But now, I saw a man who was ready to do whatever it took to be the father his children needed. The road ahead would still be tough. The twins still carried the scars of their past. But Michael was learning how to help them heal. He was learning how to be there for them in a way that no one else had been. One afternoon, a few weeks after the custody hearing, Michael invited me to join him and the twins for a trip to the park. It was a small gesture, but for Michael, it was a huge step. He had been so focused on work and making up for lost time that the idea of just spending time with the kids without any distractions was something new for him. As we walked through the park, the twins ran ahead, their laughter echoing in the warm spring air. Michael and I lingered behind, walking slowly, side by side. "I never thought I'd have this," Michael said, his voice filled with awe as he watched the twins play. "I never thought I'd get a second chance to be the father they needed. But I see it now. I see that they're not just my responsibility. They're my life." I smiled at him, feeling the weight of his words. "It's never too late, Michael. You're here. You're doing it right." He nodded, and for the first time, I saw something in him that had been missing before: peace. The anxiety, the uncertainty, the fear of failing, those things had started to fade. He was no longer just trying to fix everything. He was embracing it, all of it, the good, the bad, and everything in between. As the day wore on, we sat on a bench, watching the twins run around, their energy endless, their laughter pure. Michael looked at me, his eyes soft. "You've helped me more than you'll ever know, Ava," he said quietly. "I don't think I could have done this without you." I shook my head. "You did it, Michael. You found your way back. You found them." He smiled, his expression full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you by my side. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this: we're going to make it. We're going to be a family." And for the first time, I believed him. I believed that no matter what came next, Michael was going to be the father the twins needed. He had already started the hard work of healing, of mending broken bonds, and I knew he wasn't going to stop now. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was for sure: he had come a long way, and the twins were no longer just his responsibility. They were his family, and together, they were ready to face whatever came next. I had seen Michael grow in ways I never expected. The quiet man who had once been lost in his wealth, his work, and his guilt was now a father who was fully present in the lives of his children. The twins, too, had transformed. Their laughter was no longer a fleeting sound, a brief moment of joy amidst the quiet, but a steady, hopeful melody that filled the house, echoing with the kind of happiness they had never known. The change in all of them was palpable, but the shadows of the past still lingered. And then came the phone call that threatened to undo everything they had fought so hard to build. It was a crisp morning when Michael called me again. His voice was steady, but I could sense the underlying tension. "Ava, I need to talk to you," he said, his words clipped. "It's about the twins." I immediately felt a knot form in my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, though a part of me already feared the worst. "I got a call this morning from the adoption agency," he explained. "Their biological mother has filed for full custody. She's hired a lawyer, and they're moving forward with the case. The hearing is in 2 weeks." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. After everything, the late nights, the therapy sessions, the quiet dinners with the twins, it all felt like it was teetering on the edge of falling apart. Michael, despite his strength, sounded defeated. "I thought we were done with this," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I thought they were finally safe. But now this." I stayed silent for a moment, trying to absorb what he had just said. I could hear the panic in his voice, but more than that, I could feel the weight of his doubt. He had fought so hard, and now it felt like everything was slipping away. "We're not done," I said finally, my voice firm. "This isn't over yet." We'll fight for them. Michael let out a long breath, his frustration evident. I don't know if I can do this again, he said quietly. I've already fought for them once. What if it's not enough? I moved closer to him, putting a hand on his shoulder. Michael, you've already given them more than anyone else could have. You're the father they need, and you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out. Together. He looked up at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw the vulnerability in his eyes. He wasn't just fighting for the twins anymore. He was fighting for himself, for his own sense of worth as a father. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, consultations with lawyers, and emotional conversations. Michael was exhausted, the strain of the situation showing in his every movement, but he was determined. The twins could see the change in him too. They were quieter, more reserved, but there was still a bond between them and Michael that couldn't be broken. They clung to him in ways they hadn't before, as though they sensed that something was wrong but didn't know how to express it. The night before the hearing, I went to Michael's apartment. The twins were asleep, and Michael was sitting at the kitchen table, papers scattered in front of him. The weight of the legal documents, the evidence, and the court transcripts seemed to have become too much for him. He looked up when I walked in, and there was something in his expression that made my heart ache. I'm scared, Ava, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I'm enough for them. What if I lose them? I walked over and sat next to him. You're already enough, I said, taking his hand. You've given them everything you have, and that's all they need. He squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with doubt. What if it's not enough? What if I can't give them what they need? I smiled softly, trying to reassure him. You already have. You've given them love, consistency, and safety. You've been there for them when no one else was. That's more than enough. He looked at me, the weight of the world still in his eyes, but something shifted. He wasn't just doubting his ability to be a good father anymore. He was starting to believe that. Maybe, just maybe, he could be the father they needed. The hearing came quickly. We arrived early, the tension between us thick as we sat in the waiting room. The twins were with us, and though they tried to stay cheerful, I could see the worry in their eyes. They didn't understand everything, but they understood enough to know that something important was happening. As we walked into the courtroom, Michael's hand was firm on mine. He wasn't the same man I had met months ago. He was someone who had fought, who had stumbled, but who had finally stood tall. The hearing was a battle of words, each side trying to prove their point. The adoption agency argued that the twins' biological mother had cleaned up her life and was ready to be the parent they needed. Michael's lawyer fought for the bond Michael had built with the twins, the stable home he had given them. I sat quietly, my heart in my throat, hoping with everything in me that the judge would see what I had seen all along, the love, the devotion, and the change. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. I have reviewed the evidence presented, and after careful consideration, I have decided that the children will remain in the custody of Mr. Pierce. The biological mother's request for custody is denied. Relief washed over me, but it wasn't just the relief of winning. It was the knowledge that Michael had proven himself, not just to the court, but to his children. The twins were safe. They were home. We walked out of the courtroom, and I could see the weight lift from Michael's shoulders. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a man who wasn't just fighting for his children. He was fighting for his family. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, I believed that they could face whatever came next, together. I watched Michael as he sat on the edge of the couch, his eyes focused on something only he could see, his hand resting gently on the back of the twins' heads as they played on the floor in front of him. It had been a few months since the court hearing, and while the dust had settled in some ways, there was still a palpable tension in the air. Michael had become more involved with the twins than I could have imagined. He wasn't just showing up anymore. He was present every single day. He helped them with school projects, took them to their extracurricular activities, and did everything in his power to give them a sense of stability and love that they had never known. But there was something that still loomed over him, something he couldn't seem to shake, the fear of losing them again. How are they doing? I asked quietly, sitting next to him. He looked over at me, his gaze distant for a moment before he smiled faintly. Better, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But they're still carrying so much that I can't fix with just love. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The twins had come so far, but they were still children who had been through trauma, and that trauma didn't disappear overnight. No matter how much Michael tried, the scars of their past would take time to heal. The phone call came a few days later. It was an early morning, just as Michael was getting ready for work, and I was at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something about it made me pick up the phone. "Hello," I said. "Hello, is this Ava?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is Ava. Who's calling?" "This is Lisa with the Child Protective Services office," the woman replied. I felt my stomach drop. The voice on the other end of the line was official, no nonsense, and that alone sent a wave of anxiety through me. "Is everything all right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We have a situation that needs to be addressed," she said. "We've received a report about the twins, and we need to schedule a home visit to make sure everything is safe and appropriate in their current living situation. It's routine, but we need your cooperation." My heart raced as I processed her words. A home visit? After everything Michael had gone through to keep them, was this the next obstacle? "Of course," I said, my voice tight. "When do you need to come by?" "We'll be there this afternoon," she replied. "We'll send a social worker to meet with you." I hung up the phone, my mind spinning. I wasn't sure why they would need to investigate again after everything Michael had already done, but something about the situation didn't sit right with me. The twins were doing well. Michael was doing everything he could to make them feel safe. But now this? I looked over at Michael, who had just finished getting dressed. He looked at me, sensing something was wrong. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low. I explained the call, and his face immediately fell. "What now?" he murmured. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear on his face. "I've been trying so hard to do the right thing, and now this." His words trailed off as he sat down beside me, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. I knew what he was thinking. This was the last thing they needed. The twins were finally starting to feel like they belonged, like they had a home. And now, with one phone call, all of that was being called into question. "Michael," I said softly, my voice steady, "you're doing everything you can. You've done everything right. And I know this isn't easy, but you don't have to face it alone." He looked at me, his eyes filled with both uncertainty and hope. "I can't lose them, Ava," he said quietly. "I can't lose them after everything we've been through." I reached out, taking his hand in mine. "You won't," I said firmly. "We won't let that happen." The social worker arrived in the afternoon, just as scheduled. She was a woman in her late 30s, with a calm and professional demeanor. She didn't seem like she was here to judge, but the process felt like an invasive examination, and I could see how it weighed on Michael. The worker went through the usual questions, asking about the twins' well-being, their routine, and Michael's involvement in their daily lives. She seemed satisfied with the answers, but I could sense that something was still on her mind. After what felt like hours, she stood up. "I believe everything looks good here," she said, her voice neutral. "We just have to check a few more things, but from what I can see, the children are well cared for." Michael let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. The tension that had been building in him seemed to release all at once. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. "You have no idea what this means." As the worker left, I could see the relief wash over him. He wasn't out of the woods yet, but for the moment, it felt like they could finally breathe again. "We did it," he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine. "We're still a family." And for the first time in a long while, I truly believed that this family was stronger than anything that had tried to tear them apart. They had made it through the hardest part. The past had its hold on them, but the future was theirs to shape, together. I could sense the weight of the months leading up to this moment, but the uncertainty still hung over us like a storm cloud. Michael had proven time and time again that he was the father the twins needed. The hurdles, the setbacks, and the moments of doubt seemed to slip further behind us. Still, there was a lingering question in the back of my mind. Could we really have everything we fought for? Could Michael and the twins truly find peace? Or was this just a fragile, temporary thing? The phone call came at night, when the world felt quieter, as if everything around us had slowed down. It was Michael. His voice sounded different, distant. "Ava," he said, his words carrying a sense of urgency that immediately got my attention. "I need to talk to you. It's about the twins." I felt my chest tighten. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice betraying the panic I was trying to control. It's not about the twins," he said after a pause. "It's about me. I need to face something, and I need you with me." I couldn't make sense of his words, but I knew one thing. Whatever it was, he needed support. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'll be there." He gave me the address to his office, a place that had become a second home to him in recent months. I arrived to find him standing by the window, his back to me, staring out at the night skyline. As I stepped inside, I noticed that he was holding a letter, crumpled at the edges, as if it had been read over and over again. He didn't turn to face me right away. "I'm scared, Ava," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought I was done with all this. But I can't escape my past. I can't escape what I've done or what I haven't done." He turned around, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a man who wasn't just the father fighting for his kids. He was a man grappling with his own demons, with the shame of his past mistakes. "I tried to fix it," he continued, his voice cracking, "but I don't know if I can ever undo everything I've done wrong." I walked over to him, placing my hand on his arm. "Michael," I said softly, "you're here now. You've done the work. You're not running away anymore." He looked at me, his eyes filled with uncertainty, but there was also something else, an acknowledgement that he had made progress. "I don't know if I'm enough," he said, his voice so low it almost felt like a confession. "I'm not perfect, Ava. I don't have all the answers. What if I fail them again?" His words broke through the carefully constructed wall he had built around himself. For the first time, I saw the weight of his guilt, the burden of his past choices. "Michael," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you're doing it. You're showing up. That's what they need. That's what you need." He shook his head, pacing across the room. "You don't understand," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "I didn't just hurt them, I hurt myself. I wasn't there for them when they needed me the most. I wasn't there when I should have been." My heart broke for him. I knew the burden of guilt all too well. I had seen him come so far. He had changed so much. But this lingering self-doubt was the hardest thing for him to overcome. "You're not defined by your mistakes," I said firmly, stepping closer. "You're defined by what you do now. You're here. You're doing everything in your power to give them a home, a family. That's what matters." He paused, his gaze flickering with doubt. "What if I can't give them what they need?" he asked, his voice almost pleading. "What if I'm not enough?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "Michael, being enough doesn't mean being perfect. It means showing up every day. It means loving them, even when it's hard. And that's what you're doing. You're there for them. Every single day, in a way you never were before. And that's more than enough." He stood there for a long time, staring at the floor, as if processing everything I had said. Finally, he looked up at me, and I saw a shift in his eyes. The vulnerability was still there, but it was now mingled with something else, determination. "You're right," he said quietly. "I can't undo everything, but I can make sure it never happens again. I can give them the love they deserve. I will give them that. I will do whatever it takes." I could see the weight beginning to lift from his shoulders, replaced by the kind of resolve that only comes when someone truly believes in themselves. "That's all they need," I said, smiling. "That's all you need to give." The days that followed were full of small victories. Nothing monumental, nothing that would change the world, but moments of connection between Michael and the twins that spoke volumes. He was more present, more attentive, and more patient than ever. He still struggled with his past, still wrestled with his guilt, but he was no longer letting it define him. The twins were thriving. They were starting to open up in ways they hadn't before, their laughter more frequent, their smiles more genuine. Michael wasn't perfect, and neither were they, but they were becoming a family. Slowly, piece by piece, the family they had always needed was coming together. Michael had his flaws, but he had one thing that mattered most: the will to do right by them, and that was more than enough. As we sat together one evening, the twins curled up on the couch with their books, and Michael beside me, I realized something important. The future wasn't set in stone, but we were building it, together, and that was enough. I could feel the tension in the air as Michael sat across from me, his hands gripping the edge of the table. He was quiet, deep in thought, his gaze distant. The weeks since the hearing had been filled with small victories and the occasional setback, but it was clear that the road ahead was still fraught with challenges. The phone call that had come earlier in the day was the latest hurdle, one we hadn't anticipated. Michael had been doing everything right. He had been present, consistent, and more involved in the twins' lives than ever before. Yet, despite all the progress, there was always that lingering fear, the thought that one mistake, one misstep, could send everything crashing down. The call had been from an anonymous source, a person claiming to have information about the twins' biological mother, something that could threaten their safety and stability. "I don't know what to think," Michael said, his voice tight. "I've been working so hard to make sure they're safe, to make sure they have everything they need, and now this." He let out a frustrated sigh, running his hands through his hair. "What if I can't protect them?" I looked at him, my heart heavy with the weight of his words. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the self-doubt creeping back in. It wasn't just the fear of losing the twins. It was the fear that, despite everything he had done, it might still not be enough. "Michael," I said softly, my voice steady, "you're already doing everything you can. You've been there for them in ways no one else has. And that's all that matters." He met my gaze, but there was still that look of uncertainty in his eyes. "I'm scared, Ava," he admitted quietly. "I'm scared that I'm not enough for them. That no matter what I do, I'm going to let them down." I could see how hard this was for him, the weight of his past mistakes pushing down on him, making it hard for him to believe that he could truly be the father they needed. But I knew, deep down, that he was already more than enough. He had fought for them, not just in the courtroom, but every day since they came into his life. "Michael, you're enough," I said firmly. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to show up. And you've done that every single day." He nodded slowly, taking in my words, though the doubt still lingered. We both knew that the past couldn't be undone, but we also knew that it didn't define their future. The twins needed him now, more than ever, and Michael was ready to be the father they had always needed. That afternoon, we decided to meet the person who had called. Michael's lawyer had arranged the meeting, though we were still unsure of the person's motives. It was clear that the situation wasn't going to be as simple as we had hoped. We arrived at a small, nondescript cafe on the edge of town. The place was quiet, with only a few patrons scattered around, their voices low. As we sat down at the table, the person we were waiting for walked in. He was a man in his early 40s, with a calm, collected demeanor that immediately put me on edge. He introduced himself as Tom, and after a brief handshake, he sat down across from us. "I'm sure you're wondering why I called you," he said, his voice steady. "And I want to be clear that I'm not here to cause trouble. But I do have information about the twins' mother that could be important." Michael's grip tightened on the table. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely controlled. Tom glanced around the cafe, before continuing. "Their mother, she's been clean for some time. But there are people who believe she's still unfit to care for them. There are rumors that she might be planning something that could put the twins at risk." I felt a chill run down my spine as I listened to him. "What kind of plan?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Tom hesitated before speaking. "I don't have all the details, but it's not the first time she's tried to get the twins back. There are people in her past who think she still can't provide for them. And there are those who want to use this situation for their own gain." Michael's face turned pale. "So you're saying she's going to try and take them again?" His voice was sharp, filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. Tom nodded slowly. "It's possible," he said. "But it's also possible that she doesn't realize what she's getting herself into. The twins have been through enough. And no matter what happens, I want to make sure they're safe." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of his words settling in. Michael was quiet, his mind racing as he processed everything. I could see the uncertainty, the fear of losing them again, creeping back into his eyes. "What do we do now?" Michael asked, his voice quiet. Tom leaned forward slightly. "We take action. We make sure the twins are protected, no matter what. We make sure that their future isn't decided by their past." Michael looked at me, and for the first time in a while, I saw a spark of determination in his eyes. He was ready to fight, ready to do whatever it took to keep the twins safe. "We're not giving up on them," he said firmly. "Not now, not ever." As we left the cafe that day, I knew the road ahead was going to be filled with challenges. But for the first time in a long time, I also knew that Michael was ready to face whatever came next. He wasn't going to run away from the past anymore. And neither was I. Together, we would fight for the future we all deserved. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on all of us. But this time, we were more prepared than ever before. After the unsettling conversation with Tom, the warning about the twins' biological mother trying to reclaim custody, Michael and I knew that we had to act quickly. We couldn't let the uncertainty continue hanging over us, not when the twins had finally found a semblance of stability. Michael had already made strides as a father, but now the real test was here. He had to protect them, and he had to do it with everything he had. We spent the next few days consulting with lawyers, gathering evidence, and preparing for whatever would come next. Michael was more determined than ever, and even though I saw the worry still in his eyes, there was something different about him now. He wasn't the man who would run from a challenge. He was standing tall, ready to fight for the family he had built, ready to face whatever storm was coming their way. The twins, unaware of the looming threat, were adjusting well to their new routine. They had become more attached to Michael, their laughter echoing throughout the house as they played. There were still moments of hesitation, small glimpses of fear in their eyes when they didn't understand something, when the past seemed to creep back into their lives. But with each passing day, they seemed to grow stronger. They were beginning to trust again, to believe that this could really be home. One evening, after dinner, we sat together in the living room. Michael had the twins on either side of him, their small hands resting on his lap as they watched a movie. I sat across from them, a quiet observer of this family that was slowly taking shape. As I watched Michael, I realized something. I wasn't just watching a man struggle to be a father. I was watching him succeed. Despite everything, despite the fear, despite the past, he was here. He was present. He was fighting for them, and they were beginning to see that. How are they doing? I asked quietly, not wanting to disturb the peace of the moment, but needing to know how Michael felt. He looked over at me, a tired smile on his face. Better, he said softly. But there's still so much to work through. I nodded, understanding the weight of his words. The process of healing, for both him and the twins, wasn't going to be easy. But I knew he was committed. He wasn't going to give up. I think they're starting to feel like they belong, I said, watching the twins laughing at something on the screen. They're starting to feel like they're safe here. Michael's gaze softened as he looked at them. I'm glad. That's all I've ever wanted for them. A safe place. A home. His voice cracked slightly, and I could see the raw emotion behind his words. This wasn't just about legal battles or custody agreements. This was about something deeper, something that couldn't be measured in papers or courtrooms. It was about family and the love that bound them together. Just then, the phone rang, breaking the moment. Michael's hand froze, and I could see the immediate tension in his face. He glanced at the caller ID and let out a sigh. It's my lawyer, he said, his voice tense. He answered the call, and I could hear snippets of the conversation. Legal terms, references to court dates, but nothing that gave away the full picture. As he spoke, I watched the twins, their faces still glued to the screen, blissfully unaware of the tension hanging in the air. It was as if they could feel the shift in the atmosphere, though they didn't understand why. When Michael hung up, he didn't speak immediately. I could see the weight of the news he had just received. What did they say? I asked, my voice calm, but my heart racing. He paused, running a hand through his hair. The court date is set, he said finally, his voice filled with a mixture of resolve and exhaustion. It's in a week. I nodded, feeling the gravity of his words. A week. That was all we had. In 1 week, everything would be on the line. Everything they had worked for, everything they had built, could be torn apart. But as I looked at Michael, I saw the strength in his eyes. I saw a man who was ready to fight, a father who was ready to do whatever it took to keep his family together. We'll be ready, I said softly. We've got this. You've got this. He smiled at me, though it was a weary smile. I don't know what I'd do without you, Ava, he said quietly. I don't think I could do this alone. I reached out and squeezed his hand. You're not alone. We're in this together, Michael. You and the twins and me. The next few days passed in a blur of final preparations. Michael worked with his lawyer, gathering everything they needed for the case, while I helped him stay focused on the twins. We kept their routine as normal as possible, trying to shield them from the stress and uncertainty of what was coming. But even with our best efforts, I could see the worry in their eyes. They could feel the tension in the house, even if they didn't understand it. The night before the court date, we sat together as a family, just like we always did, Michael, the twins, and me. We didn't talk about the case. We didn't talk about the fight that was coming. We just shared a quiet dinner, followed by some time together in the living room. And as we sat there, the twins snuggled up to Michael, I realized that, no matter what happened the next day, this moment would stay with me forever. This was what mattered. This was what we were fighting for. The morning of the court date arrived faster than any of us expected. I could see it in Michael's eyes as he sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The twins were in the living room, preparing for school, unaware of the gravity of what was about to unfold. It was hard not to feel the weight of the day, the uncertainty hanging in the air like a thick fog. We had fought hard to get to this point. The court ruling had given us a chance, but today would decide everything. Michael wasn't the same man who had walked into my life months ago. He had grown, he had fought, and he had changed for the better. But there was still a deep, quiet fear in him that today might unravel everything we had worked for. He hadn't just fought for the twins' custody. He had fought for himself, for his own redemption. He had faced his past, learned to accept his mistakes, and was now fully invested in being the father the twins needed. But that fear still lingered. What if it's not enough? Michael's voice broke the silence. I had been sitting next to him, trying to offer comfort without saying too much. What if I'm not enough for them? I turned to him, placing my hand over his. You are enough, Michael, I said softly. You've been enough since the moment you decided to be there for them. And no matter what happens today, they will always have you. He looked at me, his eyes filled with doubt, but there was a flicker of gratitude in them too. I don't know what I would do without you, he said quietly. You've helped me through so much. You did this, Michael, I said, squeezing his hand. You fought for them. You've been there when no one else was. That's what matters. The words seemed to sink in, and for the first time that morning, I saw a small glimmer of peace in his eyes. The twins walked into the room a few minutes later, ready for school. They didn't seem to notice the tension between Michael and me, their smiles bright and carefree, their energy infectious. They ran over to him, their little hands grabbing his, tugging him toward the door. Come on, Dad, we're going to be late, the girl exclaimed. The boy, clutching his stuffed bear, looked up at Michael with wide eyes. Are you coming to pick us up after school? He asked, his voice filled with hope. Michael smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Of course, he said, bending down to kiss them both on the forehead. I'll be there, I promise. The twins ran off, leaving Michael and me alone in the quiet of the house. He stood there for a moment, watching them, and I could see the love in his gaze. He was their father now, in every sense of the word, and nothing, not even today's hearing, could take that away from him. We arrived at the courthouse early, the weight of the morning still heavy in the air. Michael's lawyer had already briefed him on what to expect, but nothing could fully prepare us for the long, tense day ahead. We waited in the lobby, the twins sitting quietly with us, their innocent faces unaware of the world of uncertainty that loomed over them. It wasn't just a court case. It was their future. The court session began, and we were led into the courtroom, a sterile, cold space that seemed to echo with the weight of all the decisions being made within its walls. Michael sat at the table, his lawyer beside him, while I sat quietly behind him, offering whatever comfort I could. The opposing side, the agency's lawyers, stood at the other table. They had a case, a well-rehearsed argument about the twins' biological mother and her attempts to regain custody. But I knew that Michael had something they didn't. He had built a life for these kids, a life full of love, stability, and care. The hearing felt long, drawn out. The arguments went back and forth, and I could see how hard Michael was trying to stay calm. He listened intently, but I could tell that with each new point made against him, a piece of his confidence chipped away. He had already fought so much, and now it felt like everything was on the line. But there was no turning back. Michael wasn't going to back down. He wasn't going to let them take the twins from him. When it was his turn to speak, Michael stood up, his legs slightly trembling, but his voice steady. Your Honor, he began, his voice firm. I know I'm not perfect. I know I've made mistakes. But what I have now, what I've built with these children, is real. I'm here for them, every day. I've fought for them, not because it's a legal battle, but because it's what they deserve. I'm not asking for your pity. I'm asking for the chance to be the father they need me to be. They have a future with me, and I'm not going to let that go. I could hear the conviction in his voice, and in that moment, I realized something important. Michael had already won. It didn't matter what the judge decided. He had already proven that he was the father the twins needed. He had already shown them love, care, and devotion in a way no one else had. The rest was just paperwork. The judge asked a few final questions, and then the room went silent. For what felt like an eternity, no one spoke. Finally, the judge spoke, and the decision was made. In light of the evidence presented, the judge said, I have decided that the children will remain in the custody of Mr. Pierce. The request for full custody by the biological mother is denied. Relief washed over us like a tidal wave. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling as if he had been holding his breath for hours. The twins, still unaware of the tension in the room, jumped up, running to Michael. They wrapped their little arms around him, their smiles wide and innocent, as if they had no idea how close they had come to losing everything. Michael's arms tightened around them, holding them close, and I saw a man who had fought for them, who had finally won the fight. We weren't out of the woods yet, but today, we had won. Today, Michael had proven that he was their father, and nothing could take that away. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. We were a family, and we were stronger than anything that tried to tear us apart. The days following the court decision were filled with a sense of peace that I never expected to feel. Michael was more present than ever before. The twins were beginning to settle into their new routine, and though there were still bumps along the way, there was an undeniable shift in their lives. The laughter in the house, once a rare sound, now echoed throughout each room, a reminder of just how far they had all come. Michael and I spent our evenings talking about the kids, about our past, and about the future. The weight of the battle we had just fought still hung over us, but there was hope now. Michael was no longer the man who had walked into this journey unsure of himself. He had fought for what was right, and he had won, not just in the eyes of the law, but in the hearts of his children. They were his, and no one could take that away. One evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Michael sat down next to me, his eyes tired but content. "I still can't believe it," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I've spent so long trying to fix everything, and now I'm here. I'm really here, with them, and I can't imagine anything else." I smiled, looking at him. "You've earned this," I said. "You've earned every bit of happiness and peace that's coming your way, and you've earned their trust." He nodded, the weight of those words settling in. It wasn't just about winning the court case. It wasn't just about proving himself to anyone else. It was about being the father the twins needed, being the man he had always wanted to be. And he had done that. There were still moments of doubt, moments where he questioned himself, but the difference was that now, he knew how to face those moments. He knew how to move forward. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. The twins were beginning to see it too. They were still children, still learning, still growing, but they had begun to trust Michael in ways they hadn't before. Their smiles were brighter, their laughter more genuine. They didn't look over their shoulders anymore, waiting for someone to take them away. They felt safe, and that was something that couldn't be measured in legal terms. It was something that lived in their hearts. One Saturday morning, Michael decided to take the twins on a small trip to the park. It wasn't anything grand, just a few hours spent playing, talking, and enjoying each other's company. But for Michael, it was everything. It was the first time in a long while that he felt like he was truly living the life he had always wanted. I stayed back, giving them space, watching from the window as they played together. The sight of Michael with the twins, laughing, chasing each other, felt like the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. He wasn't just a man trying to be a father anymore. He was their father, the kind of father who showed up every day, who put their needs before his own, who loved them without hesitation. It wasn't just a story of redemption for Michael. It was a story of healing for all of them. The past would always be there, a part of who they were, but it no longer defined their future. The future was theirs to create. When they returned from the park, the twins ran inside, eager to tell me all about the games they had played. Michael followed behind them, a smile on his face that spoke volumes. "How was it?" I asked, knowing that the day had meant so much to him. "It was perfect," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I never thought I would have this. I never thought I would get a chance to make it right." "You did," I said softly. "You've made it right." He sat down beside me, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't think I could have done this without you," he said quietly. I shook my head, smiling. "You did this, Michael," I replied. "You fought for them, and you never gave up." As the days passed, life continued. There were moments of joy, moments of struggle, but through it all, Michael and the twins had created something strong, something unbreakable. They were a family, bound not just by blood, but by love and commitment. And that love was enough to carry them through whatever came next. The future wasn't guaranteed, but one thing was certain. Michael had done what was hardest of all. He had embraced fatherhood, not as a role to be filled, but as a calling. And in doing so, he had given the twins more than they could have ever imagined. They had a home, they had a father, and they had each other. That was all they needed. This gripping narrative dives into the emotional journey of a father's redemption and his fight for his children's future in a world full of obstacles. The story follows Michael, a man who has spent years focusing on work and wealth, only to realize that the most important thing in his life, the children he barely knew, were the ones he had to fight for. With deep emotional struggles, Michael faces the challenge of overcoming his past mistakes while trying to provide the stability and love his children deserve. As the legal battles unfold, we see Michael's transformation from a man full of guilt to a dedicated father ready to face his fears and build a future with his kids. The emotional stakes are high in this tale of growth, love, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his children. The twist of fate that brings them together and keeps them strong despite the odds is a theme that resonates with anyone familiar with the complexities of parenthood. This is a story that shows the resilience of the human spirit, with themes that are deeply relatable to anyone who has fought for a better future. Through a series of unexpected challenges and breakthroughs, Michael and his children find their way back to each other. With the help of those around them, they embark on a journey of healing, realizing that love and commitment are the keys to overcoming any obstacle. These Black stories bring to life the struggles, triumphs, and the hard lessons that shape who we become. In the end, Michael discovers that redemption isn't about fixing the past, but being present for the future. The family, once broken, is now whole, and the love they share becomes the foundation of their new life together.